The modern individual operates within a structural confinement that requires neither stone walls nor iron bars. It is an invisible, global panopticon carried inside the pocket, paid for willingly with the currency of human attention. Every morning, millions of minds awaken and immediately submit their consciousness to a stream of artificial signals, pleading for the validation of an unseen, volatile herd. Society brands this hyperconnectivity as community, progress, and freedom. But if one observes the dynamic with cold, clinical detachment, the delusion evaporates. Humanity has constructed its own cage, and every notification is a reminder of who holds the whip. Arthur Schopenhauer understood that public opinion is a variable, worthless currency, and that to place one's happiness in the minds of others is the ultimate form of spiritual bankruptcy. The modern algorithm has merely industrialized this human weakness. It has taken the primitive drive for tribal acceptance and converted it into a highly optimized data refinery. To spend the raw, non-renewable time of existence documenting reality rather than inhabiting it, curating an illusion of joy to elicit the digital applause of strangers, is a profound tragedy. Today, we dissect the mechanics of algorithmic pacification, exposing how your need to be seen is the primary vector of your domestic enslavement. The individual who conditions their internal equilibrium on the metric of a screen is fundamentally hollowed out from within. They operate as merchants in a marketplace of vanity, trading their dignity for pixels, altering their behavior to appease a blind machine. The like is not an expression of appreciation. It is a synthetic pellet of food dropped into the cage of a domesticated animal to ensure it continues to perform. True sovereignty does not seek the applause of the crowd. It flourishes in the absolute indifference to it. The realization that the digital herd is entirely irrelevant is the first step toward genuine intellectual armor. To escape the digital corral, the mind must first comprehend the clinical precision of its design. Silicon Valley did not build platforms for human connection. It engineered psychological laboratories designed to bypass the critical intellect and target the primitive brainstem. The variable reward system, the absolute unpredictability of what the next scroll or notification will bring, is the exact same mechanism that governs the gambling house. It keeps the individual in a state of permanent, low-grade anxiety, waiting for the bell to ring. Schopenhauer observed that human desire is an infinite hunger, a bottomless pit that adapts instantly to whatever satisfies it. The digital world has weaponized this biological law. The brief euphoria of online attention dissolves within minutes, leaving behind a deeper state of lack, a colder emptiness that requires an even greater dose of validation to silence. The individual becomes an addict, pacing the perimeter of a digital cage, checking a sterile piece of glass for signs that they still exist in the estimation of the crowd. The system requires this permanent state of dissatisfaction. A human being who is content, quiet, and sovereign within their own room does not generate data, does not view advertisements, and cannot be mobilized to consume. The consumer economy requires anxious, fragmented minds that look outward for an equilibrium they lack within. Social media is the grand pacifier of the centuria mechanism that keeps the potentially dangerous individual completely occupied with their own reflection, while their vital energy is extracted by corporate monopolies. The sovereign mind recognizes that every notification is an attempt to disrupt their silence and drag them back into the herd. Let us observe the profound humiliation inherent in the curation of the digital self. The individual no longer exists as a complete entity. They exist as a curated profile, a brand, a caricature optimized for public consumption. They edit their face, mask their tragedies, and manufacture a theatrical performance of success entirely to buy the brief envy of an audience that is equally hollow. It is an auction where the human ego is sold to the lowest bidder for a fraction of a second of attention. This transactional nature of digital existence destroys the capacity for genuine interiority. When an individual witnesses a sublime landscape, a profound work of art, or a moment of absolute silence, their immediate instinct is not to feel it, but to capture it, to package it as a resource for social currency. The experience is murdered at the moment of its documentation. The individual has become a tourist in their own life, treating reality as a backdrop for a commercial that never ends. They are the content creators of their own prism. Schopenhauer made a critical distinction between what a man is and what a man represents in the minds of others. What you are within yourself remains your only true possession. It is your intellect, your character, and your sovereign solitude. What you represent to the crowd is a volatile phantom, an illusion subject to the caprices of a fickle rebacco. The modern individual has sacrificed what they are for the sake of the phantom. They possess a magnificent digital shadow, but when the power fails and the screen goes dark, they are left with a bankrupt spirit that cannot tolerate 5 minutes of its own company. There is a severe psychological penalty attached to constant, uninterrupted exposure to the collective vanity of the world. The human brain was never evolved to witness the curated, artificial highlight reels of 8 billion people simultaneously. By forcing the mind into this global arena, the algorithm creates a state of permanent psychological rorter subconscious conviction that everyone else is wealthier, happier, and more fulfilled than you are. This comparison trap is an absolute illusion. The profiles you envy are merely better-lit cages. The individual you watch is often just as bored, just as terrified of the void, and just as dependent on the devices you are. They're simply using your attention to temporarily quiet their own internal panic. It is a mutual exploitation of misery, where empty vessels validate other empty vessels to pretend they're full. To let this digital theater dictate your self-worth is an act of spiritual submission. When the inevitable fatigue sets in, the deep, existential exhaustion that comes from years of performing for a machine, the individual often attempts to unplug, but the withdrawal is painful. The silence feels like non-existence because the individual has forgotten how to validate themselves from within. They feel invisible, forgotten by the herd, and the panic drives them straight back to the device. This is the ultimate victory of the algorithm. It has made the captive terrified of the door to their own freedom. Disillusionment is the only mechanism that can shatter this dependency. forcing the mind to realize that the crowd's gaze adds absolutely nothing to the value of an individual life. Let us analyze the intellectual devastation caused by the permanent immersion in the digital stream. The modern platform does not just capture attention, it fundamentally restructures the architecture of thought. It demands a rapid, superficial engagement, reducing the human attention span to that of an insect. The capacity for deep contemplation, for sustained reading, and for the isolation required to produce original thought is being systematically erased. The masses do not read philosophy, they consume quotes. They do not analyze structures, they react to titles. The algorithm rewards the fast, the loud, and the simplistic, creating an intellectual environment of gray uniformity. The individual no longer arrives at a conclusion through rigorous logical deduction. They adopt the prefabricated opinions of their digital tribe to ensure they remain safe within the corral. They become an echo of an echo, a predictable unit in a dataset. Schopenhauer warned that reading too much text without thinking for oneself paralyzes the mind. The modern stream is the ultimate escalation of this danger. It is an uninterrupted deluge of external data that prevents the brain from ever digesting reality. The wise individual recognizes that to protect their genius, they must actively starve the machine. They must build a fortress of ignorance against the noise of the world, refusing to let their attention be shattered into 1,000 pieces by the trivialities of the day. Sovereignty is not the accumulation of information. It is the absolute mastery over what you choose to ignore. True freedom begins at the exact moment the digital leash is completely severed. When the individual looks at the device, looks at the numbers, looks at the global theater, and feels an absolute glacial indifference. This is the reclamation of the private life, the understanding that what is most valuable in your existence is precisely what cannot be digitized, tracked, or monetized by an algorithm. This is the construction of the digital armor. The enlightened individual does not seek to be known by the world. They seek to know themselves. They do not document their insights to buy likes. They write them to build their own internal architecture. They treat the screen as an interface to be used with surgical precision, never as a destination for their consciousness. They have discovered the immense, intoxicating power of being entirely untraceable by the herd. When the screen goes black, the sovereign mind does not panic. It breathes. It recognizes the silence not as an empty void, but as the clean, unpolluted domain of the self. They do not require a digital echo to confirm that their thoughts are real or that their life has meaning. They stand alone, firm and cold, content in the darkness of their own autonomy, entirely independent of the network's approval. They have recognized that the ultimate luxury in an era of mandatory visibility is the absolute power to remain unseen. The Panopticon is empty. The digital chains have been shattered. The unwritten contract that demanded your life in exchange for a metric of validation was a corporate forgery designed to keep the sovereign mind from escaping the pasture. Let the masses continue to scroll until their eyes fail, eating the digital slop that keeps them asleep. You have seen behind the glass. There is no value in public opinion. There is no truth in the echo chamber. There is only your own mind and the absolute liberty of the consciousness that has chosen its own cold, silent sanctuary over a glowing, addictive cage. The shadow does not require a follower. It simply abides in its own quiet strength. Welcome to the final demolition of your digital illusions. Welcome back to your own independent kingdom. If you have broken the digital leash, leave your mark in the comments. Subscribe to defend your sovereignty in the shadow.